So how are you doing this afternoon?
I'm doing great, thank you.
So what has been the highlight of your day? Because I know you've been in a series of meetings today.
Hunger 2022 has been very, very exciting in so many ways. For us as a group, the Tony Elemelu Foundation, we've been able to consummate two significant partnerships. We live in Africa, we see poverty, we see how our people are suffering, we see the energy of our youth, our young ones, we see their ambitions, we see their aspirations to make a difference. But access to capital remains a problem for these young ones. And for us at the Tony Elemelu Foundation, we are trying to catalyze luck. We're trying to catalyze entrepreneurship across the continent. But we understand that we can't do it alone. So for us, personally, I'm an exemplar of success in Africa. I come from a modest background. I built multinational businesses, but I realized that we need more Tony Elemelus in Africa. And for this to happen, we need to increase our capacity to empower young ones. The Tony Elemelu Foundation alone cannot do this. So we have tried to reach out to like-minded development agencies, governments, individuals, institutions, to partner with us so that we can scale what we know how to do, what we know works through what we have done at the Tony Elemelu Foundation. And happily, this Hunger 22, we've signed two partnerships, one with the American Foundation for Africa Development, and two with a UN agency for capital. And we've signed partnerships with UNDF and also with the US DF to scale what we do at the Tony Elemelu Foundation. So to me, this has engaged my time, and the next couple of hours, we want to sign another one, with the iCare Foundation. iCare Foundation, as you may know, is the second largest foundation in the world in terms of resources. We're signing with them on supporting young Africans in the area of green economy, the green energy sector. So to me, it's a wonderful time for us as a foundation, because the success of young Africans is our preoccupation. And we're happy that we can now do more in partnership with this and existing partners we already have.
So let's look at job creation in Africa and youth entrepreneurship, because I know that is one of your fortes. How do you feel about it? How can government create jobs for the youth and encourage the youth to engage in entrepreneurship?
I have often said that youth unemployment is a tragic waste of our talent. It's a betrayal of a generation. And I know that one sure way of creating employment for our people is by encouraging entrepreneurship amongst our young ones. I live in Africa. I see the harsh impact of youth unemployment. And I know, as African leader, we must do something about this. The time is ticking so fast. I know, from my experience and interaction with these young Africans, they feel highly betrayed. And we, as African leaders, friends of Africa, political leaders in Africa, and the world at large, must do something quickly so that all of us will have peace. To me, it has become an existential issue. It's something we must do for our own enlightened self-interest. These guys, very energetic, we either channel their energies positively or they use their energies in a negative way. And that would be disastrous, and that would be difficult for us to contain. We can do less now than what we can do in future if we fail to do what we need to do right now. So I believe that entrepreneurship presents the way forward, and that is why the Tony Elemelu Foundation will do that. We have trained over 1.2 million young Africans. We have provided seed capital non-refundable $5,000 each to about 16,000 young Africans. Through their works, we have created about 400,000 jobs on the continent. This is what we need to scale up. And this space, we don't want to be in this space alone. We want others to come to this space. And that is why when I told you before, I was happy with the UNCDF and the USADF to have signed the partnerships that we have signed, plus other existing ones with European Union, the UNDP, the International Red Cross. These are great partnerships helping to catalyze more entrepreneurship on our continent so that collectively we can deal with this of unemployment.
But what about government?
Google has come into the space too. Google.
Yeah, but what about government across Africa? Because
the truth is our governments in Africa can do more. I think our government pay a lot of lip service to the issue and importance and relevance and the future of our continent as it relates to our young ones. The future of Africa truly belongs to the young ones. Their success is our success. We must see success, we must define success through that prism. How that the success of these young ones, if they succeed, we know that Africa is succeeding and we succeed further. Our government must create the enabling environment. At the Tony Elemelu Foundation, I told you before, we funded over 16,000 young African entrepreneurs. But what is important is creating the enabling environment that will allow and support these young Africans with the seed capital we're giving them, with the mentorship we provide them, with the business education and training we're giving them to succeed. If you are an entrepreneur, a small-scale entrepreneur, and you don't have access to electricity, please tell me, what can you do with $5,000? So government must do so. Our government must put in place policies that support our young ones. For me, I feel so bad about this, and truly so, because it seems to me that we make the point most times. How do we move our people out of poverty if we cannot empower the young ones? And empowering them, as I said earlier, it's not even about capital alone that we provide. It's about creating the ecosystem, the enabling environment that will enable them to succeed. So I look forward to all of us embracing this, and I think this should be the preoccupation, or one of the major things AU should focus on. Youth empowerment, security issues, those two, to a large extent, will help us. And knowing that for youth to be economically empowered and to succeed, the infrastructure that we need, access to electricity power, so critical. Stifling policies must be removed. Tax reforms that support the young entrepreneurs must be put in place. Incentive system to shape the right behavior must be put in place. And for those of us in the private sector who have succeeded, we must realize that our success is nothing if we go alone. We need to carry others along so that they become even more successful than us. So that collectively we create a commonwealth, a system that makes it difficult for anyone to want to destroy, because we're all stakeholders. People want to destroy when they feel they're excluded and marginalized. And so we need to go together on this journey.
Let's look at climate change and the agenda for Africa. A lot of African leaders here at the UN General Assembly have been hammering on that, because they say their economies have been battered or negatively impacted by the effects of climate change. What's your take?
My take is this. First is our contribution to climate problem in the world is almost insignificant compared to the rest of the world. Less than 2% of the carbon emission from Africa. But we disproportionately suffer the brunt of climate change. And that's a major concern. And then the world goes on, and I believe that we need to do something about it. And expecting Africa to come on board as quickly as possible. And I encourage our leaders to do so. However, what I expect, and as we go to COP27 in Egypt, I would like African leaders to come together and speak with one voice. We have not caused nor exacerbated this situation. We bear the brunt of it. And I see it firsthand because I live in Africa. Nigeria floods now. In fact, a Guardian report yesterday, almost 400 people lives lost as a result of the flooding that just occurred. The Lake Chad Basin,
Right,
is caused between the Sahel region and the Savannah region of Africa. Is drying up. And extremism that we have in the Sahel region today is traceable to that. So we indeed are bearing and feeling the impact of this climate change. So we must do something as members of the world. But what I say is that there should be a deal that recognizes, one, that Africa, that energy transition requires a lot of capital, and that Africa does not have that capital. Africa is battling from COVID pandemic, and Africa has a lot of issues: hospital, healthcare issues, access to electricity issues, massive poverty issues, and any transition costs a lot also. So my call is, let's come together and realize that there's need for a deal that supports Africa to go through that energy transition, one. Two, there's also a need for an accommodation in terms of policies that recognizes the abundance of certain natural resources in Africa, and the fact that we need a combination of renewables and traditional energy sources for the short term to move Africa forward. So these, to me, are two major points I believe in. I support climate change, I support the energy transition, but we need massive capital support to go through that. And two, we need to make sure that in the short term, Africa is supported to approach it by combination of renewable and traditional means.
but what do you say to critics who are saying, talking about massive financial support? This is Africa yet again going to wealthy nations cap in hand, begging to be saved from the effects of climate change, and that the wealthier nations do not necessarily owe anything to Africa to support them. But what do you say to that?
Let me tell you, we've seen the world has swung from one state to the other, from multilateralism to going alone. And we've seen that we live in a global world. You can't go it alone. The advanced countries need the support, or the cooperation, of everyone. The less developed countries need also the support of the developed countries. We need to work together as members of the global community to address this. Climate change affects everyone. A problem anywhere is a problem everywhere. If there's flood, if there's the drying up of Lake Chad Basin, creating extremism, creating migration of people out of Africa, it's affecting people in other places of the world, other parts of the world. The truth is, the food security, food crisis, there's so much, the global war. So we should come together and address this issue as a global community, and no one should criticize any part. And Africa can also say, as they have said, carbon emission in the West is about 17%, and carbon emission on the continent about 2%, 1.7%. So people are saying maybe there should be another form of energy reparation here to come and compensate for creating the climate situation. So I think, for me, as statements should rise up and put some of these criticism behind. It's not time for criticism. One, climate change or climate disaster or impact is real. Two, the solution is that we need to change our ways as members of the world. Three, Africa is part of the world. We need to join hands in making this possible. However, Africa needs capital support because that transition is huge. And two, we must recognize that renewable alone cannot take us to where we want, because over 60% of Africans do have access to electricity today. So we're not even talking of a switch First, there's a deficit. We need to bridge that gap and then switch. But the good thing is we can't leapfrog. We don't need to go through that stage. But we can't leapfrog. However, in leapfrogging, it requires capital. So let's leapfrog for the benefit of mankind, for the benefit of humanity, for all of us to benefit from it.
But Mr. Elumelu, do you think African countries themselves are doing enough to cushion the effect of climate change on their respective citizens in their countries?
I think that first, there's a realization now. Most African countries are signing up. I think there's a realization that we need to transition. That, to me, is a positive move. I mean, with COVID, some countries did not even believe that COVID. Some countries did not even want to take the vaccine. And now you've seen almost the world, entire world, saying climate change is real. Because as I told you earlier, we feel the impact. I live in Africa. I see it. So that's a positive development that we're agreeing to this. But how are different countries responding to it is a function also of resources available to some of those countries. Let me tell you what we do at the Tony Elemelu Foundation, because the Tony Elemelu Foundation supports young African entrepreneurs in all 54 African countries. We had a long retreat on this, and we came up with this conclusion or resolution that people that cause this climate disaster or climate challenge for everyone are the private sector to a large extent, people. And so we need to instill in the mind and consciousness of the private sector a new way of doing things. So that, for me, climate change or transition is a long-term game. So let's capture them young. Let's inculcate in their minds the need to be more climate responsible, so that as we transition to that new world, we'll go on that journey together. And we don't start and are not able to sustain it. We don't start and in future there's another problem, we start again. So what we try to do is we introduce in the curriculum, the business education, I told you we've trained about 1.2 million young Africans. We introduce in the curriculum that consciousness, the climate consciousness. For you guys, we need, in our own self-interest, a secure, climate conducive future for all of us. And for us to do so, in everything you do, please be conscious of this. And your businesses, start reorientating, start changing your businesses. So let them be businesses that are sensitive to climate issues. So I think, for me, the climate challenge does not call for blames. No blame game. As a world, we've blamed one another for too long. We need to change that. So easy to blame government, or so easy to blame the less developed countries, or so easy to blame the developed countries. What can each and every one of us do? As private sector, we should be more responsible. We should encourage government. We should deploy our private sector expertise and resources in helping to deal with climate change, because it's a real life situation. In fact, existential to all of us, and it's threatening. If you see what I'm talking about, you know that it is real. And so let's pull resources together. Let's come together and find and do something. To me, as I said earlier, the window is closing fast on us. The time to act is now. If we don't act now, we're putting our future and our children's future at stake. We must do something.
Before we go, Mr. Elumelu, talk to me about what you see regarding the U.S.-Africa relations in the 21st century.
I think the U.S.-Africa relation has, in my viewpoint, just been defined or redefined by Biden administration. I think a month ago, when they put out the U.S. policy on Africa. And prior to that, we had Donald Trump's regime that, in my viewpoint, didn't have any concrete strategy for Africa. And before that was President Obama, who had a Power Africa Trade and Power Initiative on Africa. So I think that the US has created a big void on the African continent, and they must quickly rise to the expectations. And why do I say this? Most people in Africa love US, embrace US, but they think that US is not there as responsive as it should be in the 21st century on their issues. I speak when I come to the US. It's time to engage in a more structured, strategic manner with Africa. Aid is good, but we need more strategic development assistance to help Africa move on. There's often this complaint about China land grabbing and all the horrible things they say China is doing in Africa, but do we know how people care about China, think about China on the continent? People think that China comes to the aid of Africa, especially in the area of infrastructure development. We want to see America more active in Africa in the area of infrastructure development, and more active in Africa in the area of youth empowerment. And that's my message. I took this message to Washington April this year, but I'm happy. The partnership we signed with US Africa Development Foundation is as a result of that. So people are listening. People are listening. Joe Biden just released us his Africa strategy and has convened the Africa Leaders Forum for December in Washington. So these are positive signs and indications, and I hope it's sustained. We need a new deal for Africa from the US. We need a partnership. America's influence in Africa is huge, but I don't think America understands that. Every young African wants to behave like American, wants to speak like an American, wants to go to school in America, wants to go to America. So you see, there's this cultural tie, affinity. People love America in Africa, but at times they say, is America there for us? Look at the Tony Elemelu Foundation. The European Union supported over 3,000 young African females. They gave $25 million last year to support over 3,500 young African women through the Tony Elemelu Foundation. That is impactful, and all across 54 African countries. So in terms of assistance, you can feel it, you can see it, and you don't have contractors, middlemen, etc., taking half of the aid capital. So and America is doing a lot, but we want to make sure that what America is doing, the ultimate beneficiaries, the real people who should benefit from it, get it. The young people, the people in local communities who need the development assistance, and not the middlemen who divert this, or either they divert or they earn it by welfare commission and co. So that's what we're saying. I see a progressive, forward-looking policy coming out, and our foundation, the Tony Elemelu Foundation, we're happy that we're at the table and engaging with the White House to see how we can bring these realities to the table, so they appreciating in formulating or executing the policies and strategies that they put in place. But America has done well. The COVID pandemic, America helped a lot. And thanks to President Biden, the vaccines, they helped a lot. But there's still a lot to do, and we must work together to make this happen. The good thing is that in Africa today, you have Africans who also have a bit of resources that want to partner with the rest of the world, with America and others. So it's not just sitting together and say, give us. The Tony Elemelu Foundation, through our own family, we put in $100 million for this. So every year, we support 1,000 young Africans. We spend $10 million to support them, and it's a 10-year program. And we want to see others. Let's come together to do more. So there's a move, a departure from where we used to be before. We are putting on the table, we're saying in the 21st century, there's a better way of giving in Africa. A more catalytic way of giving, a more strategic and structured way of giving that creates self-sufficiency, self-reliance, and independence. that makes people not continually dependent on aid to succeed. We want people to have that dignity of level, to train their own children from their own economic activities and engagements. That is what we preach. That is what we think the world and the West in particular should embrace as we move forward in the 21st century.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.